Hello, and welcome to another U.S. Tech Workers podcast. Today is December 17th, 2019. I am your host, Kevin Lynn, and I am joined by Roger Ross, the Director of U.S. Tech Workers. Roger, how's it going?
Pretty good, Kevin.
Well, it's good to see you. You're in the Bay Area today. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and there was another earthquake set off on the immigration front yesterday when Senator Dick Durbin released an amendment to S-386, and based on this amendment, it looks like he's probably going to release his hold. And I thought, since Roger, you have been studying the amendment as well as a couple other documents and having some conversations with people, it would be a good idea for us to sit down and kind of, if nothing else, spend a few minutes going over the summary document for our viewers and to give them kind of some background and some knowledge on what is actually taking place here. And whether it's good or bad, whether this is really ugly, whether it's really beautiful, I think everyone is going to find this rather insightful. So, Roger, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and bring up the document. And Roger, can you see the Word document, the amendment to S-386?
I can.
Great. Well, starting off here, it says, our current per-country cap system places limits on the number of immigrants who are eligible to receive green cards based solely on their country of origin. And I know you're very much aware of the background here, but for perhaps there might be the uninitiated watching. In 1965, the United States reformed that time, the current immigration system, because we had found that the vast majority of immigrants were coming from one region of the world, and that was Northern Europe. So in all the various green cards, in this case, employment-based green cards, we had instituted an element of diversity. And to do that, we put country caps on every country. So no country could exceed 7% of all employment-based green card applications. And that's at the heart of S-386 and the companion bill in the House, H.R. 1044. They want to remove those country caps.
Correct. This has been the pressing issue with Senator Lee, where he claims that, and he writes this on his one-pager here, is that it creates an inequitable system where immigrants from large countries such as India and China are at a disadvantage when it comes to getting their employment-based green cards on time. And the fundamental problem is it's not that it's the size of the country, because size of the country is irrelevant to people coming here based on a merit-based system. It's largely because India alone has sent in a lot of non-immigrant visa workers through the H-1B visa program.
Yeah, they absolutely dominate. I mean, over 3/4 of the people who receive H-1B visas, which is the dual intent employment visa, are from India. And the vast majority of them are quite ordinary workers. This is not the genius visa.
Correct. It's always conflated with, these are high-skilled workers, and, the country needs more of these high-skilled workers coming in. But no one points out that the centralized problem with the H-1B visa program is that it brings in majority of people from India alone, and the vast majority of them are being employed at these Indian consultancy companies, the ICCs, where they're contracted out to, third-party clients, these Fortune 500 companies, And then you hear the news of American workers that were working within these Fortune 500 companies. They're forced to train their foreign replacements. So this business model has become endemic to the system. And because Congress came in and then converted the H-1B visa program into a dual intent, it started funneling a vast majority of these Indian nationals into employment-based green card sponsorship.
And
because
that's what created the backlog, isn't it?
correct.
And another thing I saw here, they talk about the system of, due to this inequitable system, immigrants from large countries such as India and China. Wait a minute. I don't know about you, Roger, but I know a lot of people who are Chinese that are fighting S-386 and the elimination of country caps.
Yes, so they have complained that proponents of Bill S-386 have misrepresented the facts that they have put Chinese foreign workers into the category who are facing backlogs. The Chinese are not facing backlogs. And this therefore disqualifies Senator Lee's thesis that because of their large population size, that's what's contributing to the backlog. So he doesn't want that to leak out. There is a portion of Chinese that are stuck in a backlog, but those are EB-5 investor Chinese nationals, because they have taken up all available EB-5 green card visas that become available each year. So those are the nationals stuck in the backlog.
Yeah, I call it the pay-to-play visa. Okay, I'm going to share our screen once again, Roger.
Sure.
Okay, going down. It says, importantly, this agreement does not increase overall levels of immigration into the United States. It is consistent with the bill's commitment to equal treatment under the law and preserve and strengthens other important safeguards for American workers. And I say bah humbug. What do you say, Roger?
So this is the biggest fabricated lie over here, because when you truly assess, as we will go and discuss what the amendments do, it is in fact going to increase the immigration numbers into the United States. And it's very important to define, what do we mean by immigration levels? I think Senator Lee or most of the Senate Republicans consider immigration levels based on just a permanent residence. But as we will see, you are de facto going to bring in foreign nationals that can stay here indefinitely on an EAD program, which is what this amendment does. And it allows a venue for more foreign nationals from temporary guest worker visa programs like the J-1 visa or the OPT program to directly benefit from just getting EAD cards if they can find an entity that will sponsor them for that system.
So what you're saying, Roger, because the way that they are trying to massage this through is like, okay, we're going to remove the country caps. Indian nationals will dominate the employment green card system for easily the next 10 years. I see sunset provisions for 9 years in this, but easily 10 years. So to massage that through and assuage all those who would be impacted negatively by that, they're going to give EADs and authorizations to work here in the U.S. to everyone who's in the who's applied for a green card. Is that correct?
Correct. So they cleverly disguise this. They say that it doesn't increase the immigration numbers. These people are already here. While that may be accurate, what they're not taking into account here are the people who are coming in these temporary visa programs like the OPT as well as the J-1, the L-1. They already say that, these are people who have already applied for their employment-based green cards and are stuck in a huge queue. So the numbers are not changing. They're already here. We just want to satisfy them. Well, when you're satisfying them, now you're opening the floodgates for other people that you're going to have to satisfy that are going to take advantage of this system that you have created. So you're going to have all these OPT folks coming in, J-1 visa workers, L-1. They're all going to start, finding some entity to sponsor them for an EBGC just so they can get this EAD card that is part of the amendment program here.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share our screen one more time here. Okay, Roger, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so overview first. The agreement adds a new transition provision to the bill to ensure that no class of immigrant is frozen out of the employment-based green card system. Specifically, a small percentage of available green cards, 5.75%, are prioritized for consular applicants residing abroad in countries other than India and China. This provision will sunset in 9 years and is in addition to the current 3-year transition set-asides in S386. This is this the throwback to the Purdue and Paul Ass carve-outs that we saw earlier in attempts to pass this bill?
Correct. So I'm still unclear whether these are just an added provisions or whether, you know, in lieu of what Senator Perdue and Senator Rand Paul wanted, in addition to their requirements, there's also another 5.75% of green cards allocated for people that live outside of the United States. And as you can see, they've excluded Indian and Chinese nationals from applying into that program. So this is, targeting the American Hospital Association's concern of bringing in nurses. And
this bugs me. I'll tell you, Roger, I'm sorry for interrupting, but you know, we train nurses in this country. We need to be training nurses in this country. Mm-hmm. And so much of our healthcare system relies on these Band-Aids of bringing in foreign workers as opposed to educating more of our people. Moreover, education is expensive here in the US. As opposed to other countries. And when someone graduates with an LPN or an RA, they should be able to find a job and not experience the kind of wage deflation that comes with this kind of competition.
Exactly. You know, people think that we're not against the nurses or, we favor other rest of the world over the Indians, but that's not the case here. We believe in these corporations not abusing these programs to just funnel in cheaper labor. Now, if there's indeed a shortage of nurses, well, we need to provide proof that there's indeed a shortage. We can't take, the association that is bringing in nurses to tell us that. We actually need to hire someone from the bureau that goes out and does these, market tests and research to see if there is indeed a shortage and whether these people are truly deserving of bringing in foreign nurses to satisfy that requirement.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share our screen again. Scroll down a little bit here. Second, the agreement makes an additional makes an additional H-1B reform designed to protect American workers competing for jobs with temporary visa holders. And that is this. Companies with more than 50 employees who rely on temporary visa workers for more than 50% of their workforce cannot sponsor more temporary workers for employment. This is a common sense reform at root to root out abuse in our non-immigrant visa programs.
Yeah, so this is more of a this is a disguise here where it's like, look, we care about H-1B abuse and we're going to finally target those companies that employ 50% of their workforce. So in theory or on the surface it looks like, wow, that's great, but when you really assess this,
I got to know, where do they come up with 50%? I mean, there's a tipping point when it comes to issues like social Darwinism, for instance. Who ends up getting promoted? Well, people promote people like them. We have made great advances in this country in the area of EEOC. All of this would be wiped out in a in a situation where half your workforce comes from one country, and typically males from one region of one country in particular, and we're talking about India.
Yeah. I mean, I can see if this bill went into effect, I could see how they would game this system. So first of all, when they say 50% of their workforce, you could have a large company like Adobe, for example, which, you know, employs various American workers in different departments, marketing, sales, etc. But they're going to take that whole company as a whole, including all the departments, and then determine if 50% of their workforce is on H-1B. What
There
they
you go.
should be doing is going into their IT or software department and seeing, well, how many of those are representative of H-1B visa. So your whole IT department could just be H-1B visas brought in from India. So, you know, these things are just a gimmick, and really, I think a lot of these companies can try and find loopholes to go around this. And furthermore, they can open up subsidiary entities to funnel in more cheaper labor, thereby meeting that threshold of the 50%.
And you know they will. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share our screen once again because it only gets worse. Okay, so specifically, this agreement creates a front-end filling system. Aliens already legally work in the United States on temporary visas who have a green card application, I-140, may file to adjust their status while they wait for a green card to become available. Now, there's an aspect to this that I like, because my issue with one of the root abuses of H-1B is essentially keeping what I call indentured servants on the plantation. Companies
Right.
sponsor someone here, they do their first 3 years, they apply for an extension for 3 years, and then the company, sponsors them for a green card, and if they're backlogged 20 years, well, they got someone for 20 years. So in a way, it's like, well, let's free them from the reservation. But what are what are your thoughts on this, Roger?
So this is the crux of this is the heart of the whole disaster here in this bill. Now, I am very sympathetic to the people who have been waiting, you know, for a very long time in the backlog. I do, you know, I'm 50-50 on the whole, you know, providing the EAD thing. I've spoken to various Indian nationals, and I always thought that the EAD solution would benefit them because it would get rid of the indentured nature of, you know, these companies exploiting them. Having said that, Congress has not fixed the source of the problem. So you can provide them with all these temporary EADs, but that in short is not going to do anything. It will remove them from the indentured servitude. But what they have done here cleverly, and I think this is also some of Senator Durbin's doing to please the rest of the world, is he's afforded the luxury of anyone that applies for employment-based green card the ability to now also get an EAD card. I would have changed this to put a time slot where people who have been waiting, you know, 5 years or more for an employment-based green card, those people are afforded the privilege of getting an EAD card. Instead, what they have done here is that anyone who simply is, you know, approved for the initial petition for an employment-based green card, which is the I-140, can simultaneously also apply for their adjustment of status and then also be approved for an EAD card. So the way the system works currently, Kevin, is that the Indians, being from, you know, the backlog country that they are not afforded the luxury of applying for the adjustment of status, thereby also receiving the EAD card, because there is no green card available for them to adjust their status and get one.
Mm-hmm.
But rest of the world is afforded that luxury. And this is really pissing the Indians off, that the, you know, rest of the world is afforded that luxury. What Senator Lee has come and done with this amendment has said is, I'm going to provide that luxury to all of you. So the problem is, and this is where the increasing of the immigration numbers comes in, is that this luxury is not just afforded to H-1Bs, but it's anyone who is on a temporary guest worker visa program. So think of the incentives that are created by offering this luxury. Not only do you get an EAD, but your spouse will get one, and your children will be protected from the age out restriction, the age out clause, which is that, you know, if your children reach an age of 21 and you as a parent have yet to receive your green card, those kids would then have to come and apply on their own separate visa to remain in the country. But now this clause also protects them, so they don't have to self-deport. Now you're bringing in more, you know, family members into this, so you're thereby increasing those numbers. Your temporary guest worker visa programs like the J1 or the OPT, there's a larger incentive for those people now to just try and find an entity where they will sponsor them for employment-based green card, thereby getting this EAD card. So think of all the black market opportunities will be out there.
Exploit this.
As we see in these ads, you know, we will sponsor you and you will get H4 EAD. Now they will be advertising, now you will get EAD, we will help you. And as we know, there's a lot of backdoor dealings that have been done where
a lot of exploitation.
You have someone who works at a company A, but he doesn't have to work for company B, but he can pay them a small bribe on the side and say, hey, sponsor me for an employment-based green card, and here's 25 grand. And once that first part is approved, they will also get their EAD card. And now that guy can go back to company A and say, all right, see you later. I can now freely move around. So this whole black market dealing is going to become more prevalent.
Yeah, and they say, you know, this will sunset all in 9 years. It's like, oh, we're going to fix this, you know, once this current backlog is reduced. But the reality is it's not. We haven't done the reforms we need to the H-1B visa program. Wouldn't you agree, Roger?
Exactly. The problem with this bill is that a lot of these senators are trying to put in their fixes for the H-1B with this bill. It should be a totally separate issue. The Fairness for High School Immigrants Act is a totally bad bill because it misrepresents the fact that it is the country cap quotas that are the cause of the problem for these backlogs. They are not. We need to increase H-1B reform and reinforcements and scrutiny to make sure that, you know, no one can exploit these employment-based green cards where a lot of these H-1Bs are funneling into, because they can file for H-1B extensions and remain indefinitely into the country. The I-140, which is through the employment-based green card system, is such an outdated process, Kevin. I mean, yeah. They are advertising these jobs in Sunday newspapers for, you know, software engineering roles. Who looks at that? The H-1B visa program does not have any clause that requires for an employer to prove that a qualified American worker was not available for the job. Therefore, we sought a foreign worker. There's nothing legally in law that requires an employer to do that. And then in the employment-based green card category, they have to find ways to disqualify American workers to allow that H-1B to get their green card. That is such a broken system, and this is what they're not reforming.
Well, you know, in closing, well, not in closing, but one last thing, Roger. I'm going to share my screen with you again. And early on, it does appear that some organizations that were in support of Lee's unanimous consent to get the S-386 passed are coming out against it. And I just pulled up the article that came out today in the Financial Express, and the headline reads, NASCOM opposes hotlining of S-386 bill in U.S. as certain provisions could have damaging effect. And it looks like they're pointing to the 50-50 clause we had talked about earlier in this.
Yeah, and the damaging effect is only to their bottom line. You know, you know, like I said, on surface, it looks great. I mean, it's great that they're targeting these ICCs, but better reinforcements and better reform needs to be in place. I'm from the camp where I don't even want these ICCs to have the luxury of bringing in H-1B visas, or even affording them the privilege of sponsoring them for employment-based green cards. If you're bringing someone and then contracting them out to a client who's also displacing American workers, why are you providing them the privilege of an employment-based green card petition? That is what Congress should be fighting against. But instead, they're just setting a percentage cap and putting all these meaningless reforms that are really not going to do anything to protect American workers.
Yeah, this is really, really tragic. Well, I'm hoping that I'm not sure. When you look at the calendar for the end of the year, it's December 17th. The Senate had originally planned to go into recess at close of business last Friday on the 13th. For sure, they're going to be in session for the rest of this week because they're still doing, they're in the weeds with appropriations right now, but also they have things like the US, Mexico, Canada agreement that could come up that was passed by the House. I'm sure Trump would like a quick victory on that. And they also have impeachment looming. Unless they do a quick acquittal, that could be a long time in process. And, you know, could this come before or after impeachment? I don't know. And, you know, if Congress or the Senate stays in session through this week, will they go into be open for business next week, the weekend of Christmas? I don't know. So a lot of unknowns out there. You know, will they attempt another unanimous consent? Will they take it to the floor? Will they have proper hearings? All we can do is be vigilant, don't you think, at this point, Roger?
This bill definitely deserves hearings now that all these complicated changes to our immigration system have been added. And maybe that was to the genius of Senator Durbin to, you know, make this conversation and grow and bring it to hearings. Because let's assume if this even passed through a UC vote, it's going to go back to the House and they're going to have to assess all these different amendments that have been added to the bill. And then there are going to be people lobbying to get rid of certain amendments. I'm thinking they're going to try and get rid of the Grassley Amendment, which has the Department of Labor turning into a fee-based institution and scrutinizing a lot of these petitions. So you know there's going to be heavy lobbying to get that removed. And then it will be brought back to the Senate, and then, you know, the Senate will have to approve the new changes. So it's going to be an ongoing long battle. So I think we have some time here to truly educate people of how disastrous this whole thing has turned out to be. And furthermore, even with all these amendments added, they haven't tackled the backlog issue. And it's going to create a bigger backlog. So it's such a joke of a game that all these people are playing. And the whole thing is that this is just a bad bill. There's no amendments you can do to make this a good bill. Focus on H-1B reform, close the tap that is allowing the water to flow in and flood the bathtub, and then we will focus on the backlog issue and see what we can do to expedite a lot of these folks.
Because we've had a lot of conversations on this, Roger. My thought was, just like you said it perfectly, let's fix the backlog. Let's fix the abuses. And the Americans are a kind and generous people. They will deal with the backlog in an effective and humane fashion. I'm absolutely sure of this. But one thing in closing, Roger, that I thought was interesting, I didn't bring this up earlier, we were talking about opponents to the bill. I thought it was really interesting. Our big adversaries on this have been Immigration Voice. And I thought it was their reaction to the amendments rather quixotic in that they consider the Amendment a poison pill. And I'm thinking, wow, the conversations or debates rather we've had with leaders of the Indian community here in the US, to them, a lot can be assuaged with the EAD clause. I'm wondering why Immigration Voice would not be excited about this.
So in the past, the Indian community had always wanted the whole EAD thing. They had begged Obama for the EAD clause. They said if we have to wait for green cards, will at least afford us the luxury of just getting an EAD card, and we'll be happy with that. We will wait as long as you want, but give us an EAD card. And Obama, because he passed DACA, he says, I can't do that. The best I can do is give your spouses H4 EAD. So that's how the H4 EAD came to be. And, you know, the Indians are now being gifted the ultimate prize here, which is EAD cards, along
Right.
with their S-386 bill. And immigration voice executives are not liking it because, yeah, it does create a talk for stalling, but you know, this is what they wanted, and you're going to see very quickly that the immigration voice doesn't have the interest of their constituents as they want them to believe. Look at the harassment campaign they had on Senator
Absolutely.
Durbin.
I mean, I was on the Hill today, and I stopped by Senator Durbin's office, and the three people in their front office are answering phones the whole time that I was in the waiting room. I thought that, you know, that's the kind of harassment that they have called upon, you know, our legislators in this country.
Right, and then you would wonder what senator would want to sympathize with them if this is how you're treating them. And that too, being a foreign national in this country that has allowed you this luxury to work and live here and provide opportunities for your whole family, this is how you're treating its citizens. I mean, it's not just Senator Durbin, it's, you know, we have been the focus of harassment. Right. Our constituents have been focus of harassment. And, you know, sometimes you wonder whether these are the type of people you want to invite to your country if this is all their tactics of trying to, you know, dissuade naysayers who are just trying to have a rational dialogue into fixing this issue.
Yeah, and that, you know, is really based on the whole concept of real fairness as opposed to abuse. Well, Roger, I didn't want to get into a long video because I know everyone wants to get, you know, up to speed on what is going on. And any advice you can pass on to the U.S. tech worker community before I sign off?
I would encourage the community to focus on the Senate Republicans and tell them that do not be duped into believing that this does not increase immigration numbers. It is, in fact, going to increase immigration numbers, and this is how it's going to do. How it's going to do it based on our dialogue that we have had. It's going to allow people who are on temporary work permits like the OPT or the J1 visas to have incentives to find an entity that will sponsor them for a quick employment-based green card, therefore getting EAD cards. So you're going to be increasing those numbers, and they're all going to be waiting patiently in the line until their term comes up for a green card, or when Congress increases the number of green cards. You know, this is all leading to increasing immigration numbers. So I would encourage them to call, and I would ask for, you know, public hearing. Keep calling, ask for a public hearing. Do not try to pass this through a UC vote because it's unfair to, you know, do it through that process. Okay, well, super. Roger, thanks for joining me today. We'll see how it all goes. And to the U.S. tech worker community, thanks so much for joining us. Please, if you liked what you saw, give us a thumbs up. And if you didn't like what you saw, give it a thumbs down. It still all works well with the algorithm that YouTube uses. But also, go to our webpage. If you haven't signed up for our weekly newsletter, please do so. And go to that support us page and contribute, because it's your contributions that allow us to keep our legislative education programs going. Take care and have a great week.